Okay, trying Facebook again. So it looks like we got about 50 people in. So thank you guys for joining us. What we're waiting on is we're trying to get the Facebook live stream up, and then we will officially start. We should have thought about having lounge music while we're waiting.
Oh. Was, what'd you do today?
Play with my son, did some work, took a little bike ride, worked out. The day in the life of quarantine. You know, what about yourself?
Working, talked to JB and Sue for a while, and then I went and got in a little run. So that was nice. Same thing.
Good.
So working out breaks up the monotony, I guess.
I know. I hear you. It's good. It's really nice to get outside and do some stuff. 92 degrees though.
Positive for this is I get a second maternity leave with my little one.
Yeah, that's true.
Work on crawling, all the good stuff.
Yeah. It's good.
Find the small joys in every day, guys. Small joy in every day.
It's the little things.
So what's the weather up there in Montana?
It is beautiful. It was sunny and 65 today. So we are thankful for that, but it did snow last week. So there's that as well.
Whoa.
Okay, Facebook is working, so we are officially good to go.
All right. All right, everybody, thanks so much for being here. I'm Caitlyn Cain with the Texas Blaze, Director of Player Development. Really excited. Tonight I'm going to get to be talking with jbslimp, the President of Texas Blaze.
Hello.
Hello. Sarah O'Brien, she is the Assistant Coach at the University of Montana.
Hey, everybody.
We've got Brittany Schaefer, a physical therapist, ex-alum from LSU.
Hello.
And Austin Wasserman, he is the founder of Wasserman Strength and High Level Throwing.
Hey, everybody.
Awesome. So again, thanks guys for being here. We're going to talk throwing, so let's get into it. Just wanted to share a quick personal story. I had the opportunity to meet Austin back in April of 2018. I'd followed a lot of his stuff on social media, saw a lot of his stuff on the One Softball app, and really bought into what he was doing when it came to throwing. It's so common to see bad throwing patterns, right? And kids suffering from injuries, low overhand throw speeds. And I was really struggling to help those kids get to the next level. So my assistant coach and I at the time, Rodney Thomas, we started looking at other programs, and that's when we found you, Austin. So
awesome.
April of 2018, I think we asked you to fly into Houston.
Yep.
And you couldn't wait to get down here to that 92-degree weather.
Yeah, we got some good work in.
So we got in a private session with, it was a second-year 12U team that year, and had a private session with him for about 2 hours. And then we committed to doing Austin's high-level throwing drills every day during our everydays between April and July. And then July comes PGF. And we were able to go to PGF and place third there, and did not commit a single throwing error during the entirety of nationals, which was pretty amazing, especially for that age.
Yeah, that was wild.
Yeah. So for me, I've been a believer since at least April of 2018.
Awesome.
But ever since then, I've learned a ton from you, Austin, and we're just really excited to hear from you today. So if you wouldn't mind sharing what you got, we're ready to get going.
Yeah, awesome. Caitlyn, thank you so much. Like, that's, when you told me that at PGS, I was like, holy cow, that's incredible. But you put the work in, and your players, did their everydays, they did their prep work, they did their patterning. You as a coach were on them to get it done, and obviously the results showed. So throwing is one of those things it gets neglected. It's an undervalued skill. I have a PowerPoint presentation that we'll kind of get into right now and just and dig through it. And I only have about a half hour to get this information to you, but try and do the best you can with what I'm talking about in terms of patterning and drill work. And Brittany's going to talk more about the physical therapy side and training and some hypermobility and things like that. So we can get right to it. So I'm going to share my screen right now, and then we'll talk high level throwing.
All right, Austin, while you share, I'm going to pick our first prize winner.
Ooh.
So out of our participants, all right, let's see who we've got. We've got Jordan Clark. So Jordan Clark, thank you so much for being here. First prize we're going to give out today is the High Level Throwing book. So Jordan Clark, you won, Wasserman's High Level Throwing book.
There you go.
To claim your prize, just shoot me an email at ccain@texasblaze.org, ccain@texasblaze.org, and we'll get that sent to you.
Heck yeah, awesome. Congrats. We'll get that set up for you. All right, so we'll get rolling with the High Level Throwing program. We're going to talk about redefining the phrase, throw like a girl. So let's get after it here. So what is high level throwing? High level throwing are principal movement patterns throughout the throwing delivery based on the ever-changing external environment and situation. So we're talking about movements through positions and not positional and static throwing. And we need to move through these specific checkpoints. So I think in the past, we've been so stuck on stationary drills and getting to certain positions that we forgot about how to be, fluid with our body and quality movement patterns, how to rotate efficiently, how to sequence the arm with the body and the stride. So, we kind of, dug ourselves a little hole there with teaching positional training and positional throwing with our athletes. And, I think we're doing a lot better job now in the last couple of years of how we're really developing our athletes from a movement standpoint, and then bringing that into, onto the field and into a skill. So it's not a style, like we're not saying oh, you have to have a style this way, this is high level throwing. This is a framework. We are talking about concepts. We're talking about how the arm moves. We're talking about how the stride occurs. We're talking about hip movement, torso movement. This is a framework that we're trying to work in, and understand that every athlete is going to be completely different torso lengths, different femur lengths, different arm lengths. There's a lot of, variables that occur in these athletes. So we have to understand that it's a framework and we're not just teaching a style of throw. And like I said, it's just a very neglected, undervalued skill. We always, talk about, hey, let's go warm up for a couple of minutes and then get to the more important things. But we really have to take the time to, prepare the tissue and prepare the bodies for the demand of throwing before we actually get to those. So I think in the past, we've tried to oversimplify a very complex movement too much, where we've created these robotic, positional drills and positional throwers. So, our goal with high level throwing is to create movement, body awareness, movement ability, score them on how they, sequence their body properly. So we're going to kind of dig into establishing a routine. As we get older, throwing volume starts to increase. So we need to build a great routine from an early age. And I think we had this conversation, Caitlyn and JB, before of, college coaches, and even, Sarah, obviously you can, chime in with this. College coaches, they don't have a ton of time teaching fundamental and foundational patterns. So yes, it's going to be part of their fall training or part of their skill sessions. But if these athletes, have these patterns established from a young age, it's going to be a lot easier for the high school coaches when they get them to mold them to what they want to be, and then the college coaches from there. So, we really have to hammer these, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old athletes with good, solid fundamentals. And it's really more than just throwing hard. We're not trying to see how hard you can throw. The goal of high level throwing is to create these proper patterns and to prepare the tissue, prepare the joints, and prepare the entire body for what we're going to be doing in the skill of throwing. So, if you hit 7 days a week and only throw once a week, that's a problem if you're a positional player. All right. So there has to be some consistency, some everydays that we're implementing. So things that we see and things that I see as a coach, and I'm sure other coaches are seeing, some variations of this. We see inefficient arm pathway and arm shape, really weird, ways the arm is drawn back, how the arm moves through the throwing zone. There's just a lot of weird stuff that happens. There's also a lot of humeral head shifting. So in your shoulder joint, athletes aren't stable enough yet to do these maximum effort throws. So we have to really focus on the cuff work, the stability of the scapular, and how it kind of interacts together. So, not just, saying a throwing program is just with your arm. It incorporates, timing of the rotator cuff. Involves your entire core strength. It involves your hips. It involves your legs. There's a lot of different things that it involves. So we're seeing kind of some shifting going on in the joint. We're seeing, inability to rotate effectively, meaning, athletes never done a rotation med ball throw before, or have never done some type of, rotational slam side to side. So, these things are easy to implement at a very young age. We're also seeing inefficient lead leg patterning, probably because there's a lack of hip strength, lack of timing of how the muscles, activate upon foot contact. So there's some weird stuff that we see with the lead leg, and it could just be the athlete is just not strong in their hips. And then we just kind of see overall just like movement quality is just really weird. Athletes aren't doing a dynamic warm up. They're not doing preparatory movements prior to their session, whether it's hitting or throwing or infield or a strength session, whatever it might be. Like, movement quality has to improve dramatically, because we're going to see that transfer to the field in throwing. Okay, so I thought this was pretty interesting. This was, I think, in 2018 study done of annual injuries for softball players, and you can see how crazy it is for the 13 to 17-year-old age group. It's like, what is that, over 17,000 over 17,000 injuries a year. So it's pretty wild to see that age group, like, we need to do a better job of patterning with the throw. We need to do a better job with strength training, basic things that we can do on the field, in the weight room, in a private facility. We can start to incorporate, training with the skill, and not just a 1-hour skill session. We can blend all of these things in together. I thought this was really, really interesting. Oops, sorry about that. This slide right here, if you can't throw, you won't be able to take part in ... Like, to me, that was really, really powerful. Like, we have to teach these athletes how to move the body and how to rotate from a young age before they can progress into an elite athlete. So, proper throwing sequence, there's lots of, images out there showing the sequence, and we understand it's this sequential movement, larger movements followed by smaller movements. We have to create resistance within our body in order to create tension, in order to create velocity. So this clip right here, I think this was in Houston, actually, and we're looking at kind of the rear hip, the back femur. So the femur has a way that it moves within the joint, and you can see how this back hip, we call internal rotation, how it internally rotates in order to set the arm and to set the pelvis. So this was a clip that really kind of like stuck out in my mind, that, hey, this girl is doing something completely different than what most athletes are doing. And when we start to see like the L drills and the static drills that are out there, we realize that it's not doing anything for these patterns. It's not enhancing the way that we want this skill to occur. So this rear hip, this back femur turns in as the arm loads back. Okay, so really, really powerful clip for me. I wanted to share that with you guys. So we kind of identify 4 components of the throw. We talk about the pathway, which again is how the arm moves back into load and how the arm moves through the throwing zone. The arm shape, which we'll get into, is basically the angle between the humerus and the forearm at full weight bearing foot contact. Hip to trunk relationship or separation, again, is basically how the pelvis and the torso interact together. So as the pelvis rotates and the stride starts to happen, then the torso starts to kind of counter rotate in the opposite direction. So we're creating some tension, separation between those two structures. And then lead leg patterning, how that front leg applies force into the ground and how we stabilize that body in order to rotate and accelerate the upper body as fast as possible. So here's your standard L drill. I know I still see it out there. And again, the information is there, and coaches, if you want to continue to do it, go ahead. But if you want to take a look at kind of how the body's supposed to work and how it's supposed to move in a rotational, component, let's start to kind of move the body a little bit better. So I used to teach L drills. I used to teach wrist flicks because I didn't know any better. It was just really easy to teach a large group of athletes. So, everything is moving forward, the hips, the torso, the arm. There's no resistance being created. There's no sequence points happening, all right, or no tension points happening. So, the L drill is something that we need to get away from. And this is kind of all we're doing with the L drill. We're just kind of doing like a lateral raise. Like if we're doing dumbbell raises, like a shoulder raise, we're not actually engaging any of the muscles that stabilize the shoulder blade and helping to retract and set the humeral head, set the arm for a proper throw. So if we're doing this over and over again, we can't really sequence the entire body effectively, and we can't really create tension points within that upper arm. So here's a demo. Here was a girl that was clearly a lifter, like meaning the arm just kind of lifts straight up. And she never really engages muscles in her back and doesn't really utilize her scapular effectively. So we did a lot of drills. This is the same day, probably within a half hour or an hour, and completely different pathway as she loads the arm. So this is a short stop. In the clip before, I'll play it again. We have this kind of deltoid heavy, like the arm just raises up. And you see that a lot with pitchers that also play a position that kind of have a hard time distinguishing between raising the arm and then loading the arm back. So here's that clip of the change that we've made with the elbow being even or below the shoulder as she loads to help sequence the body a little bit better and to help engage all the muscles in that posterior aspect of that shoulder. So this is an interesting one, and it gives the coaches or the player kind of a checkpoint of where their arm is at full weight bearing contact. So we are looking for an angle between 60, 90, 95 degrees of this elbow flexion at weight bearing foot contact. And that's kind of what all the research is pointing to. Obviously, if we have girls that are a little bit taller, longer limbs, that 95 might become 100 degrees for them. But again, this is a framework. This is what we're kind of looking for in these types of pathways. So as that foot starts to plant, that angle between the humerus and the forearm should start to get between 60 and 90 degrees to allow that arm to get into nice external shoulder rotation. You'll see it in the next clip here. I'm just going to play this through. Pretty interesting clip to see how the arm kind of works into shoulder external rotation before the forearm unravels through ball release. So if you'll see, girl, and I have some videos at the end of this to show you what I'm talking about, but this is a really nice, powerful clip to show you how the arm transitions into this kind of vertical forearm, shoulder external rotation before the forearm unravels through ball release. One of my favorite clips to see. Coach, did you have any questions before I keep rolling? Anything you want to jump in there? Or... Cool.
No, the only thing I will say is I'll dive in a little bit more into the drill piece a little bit later, but what Austin's saying is true. The way we taught throwing as coaches was wrong. It hurt our athletes. So if we can buy into this and really adapt these things into our throwing protocols, the positivity that we're going to get back on the backside of that, and again, you're looking at that 13 to 17 age group. That's the age group I don't have. That's the age group that's coming to me. So then I'm getting those athletes who all have UCL issues, they have labrum issues, they have rotator cuff issues, and those are things that are going to impede the way that I'm able to coach them because their pathways were so inefficient.
Awesome.
So again, just going to continue, let Austin drop the mic because this is what you need to hear. This is what it is, and I'll break it down a little bit later as well.
Cool. Appreciate that. All right, cool. So I showed you this kind of weird clip of this person with an arm behind their head. And the first time I did a drill talking about arm behind setups, people were like, you're crazy. We don't want to wrap the arm. Like, what's the purpose of this? You never throw like that. The whole goal is not to be like, okay, feel the ball and put the arm behind your head. That's not the goal. The goal is to get athletes away from this L drill. Let's allow them to explore their shoulder blade and how everything is working together. There's a lot of blended movement. So as she rotates back, her torso is rotating, the arm is still moving back. So she's loading, utilizing all the muscles in her back. And then she starts to rotate and accelerate her torso forward. So this is the arm behind drill is just kind of a standard setup that we use, whether it's double kneeling, standing, right foot forward, left foot forward. It really helps the athlete to explore scapular movement, but also to minimize this shape between the humerus and the forearm as they go back and as they go forward through ball release. So again, infielders, catchers, outfielders, all of these athletes can do these types of drills. It's focused on patterning of the pelvis, the torso, the throwing arm, and the glove side, all working in different directions, which is why throwing is really complex. All right. And like when a dad from the stand says, hey, straighten it out, right, get on top, like these are weird terms that don't really mean anything like at all. So, I got your back, 12-year-old athlete that throws a ball in the stands, trying to work on your body. I understand that. All right.
I think also one of the things that I've noticed with the kids that I've worked with is that, throwing is a complex pattern, but if the athlete truly learns to do these drills and do them correct, it starts to change their patterns without them really even understanding it. The drills really do a good job of changing those patterns for them, even if they don't understand, all the complexity that goes behind it. And that's one thing I really enjoy about teaching the drills and seeing the results after kids are doing the drills for a while.
Awesome. No, that's a really good point. I appreciate that. And I think that's what they were meant for, was to be, as simplified as possible, but not taking the element of, being free and knowing that each athlete is different and they're going to accomplish this movement the way that their body is telling them to. Cool.
Austin, similar to what JB said, teaching these drills, I've gotten resistance before from kids just because they've never seen it before, right? And they want to know, wait, why? So if we have coaches on here right now or athletes who are just seeing this for the first time and they're asking about the arm behind drill, can you kind of already said it, but can you 101 it for them why that's such an important way to or an important pattern to learn?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the arm behind, let me just kind of go back to it. Like, it's really a weird setup because am I getting the ball behind my head? I want to be in like a 90-degree angle, or how's that ball going to come out the right way as I rotate my body forward? So again, the whole goal for the arm behind setup is for the athlete to explore their shoulder blade, like in the back of their and the right arm, like how that shoulder blade moves back, all the muscles that stabilize it, how the arm shape, so this angle right here becomes minimized. So we're getting away from that L drill, which anytime we're getting away from this 60 to 90, 95 degree angle, we could potentially add more total stress to the elbow. We don't know where that stress is coming from. We had, the modus sleeve on our athletes, then we'd be able to, tell, or if you have the modus on your athletes, you'd be able to tell for sure. But the whole focus is to repattern these old school thought process and old school drills of the arm pointing away and getting very extended before the arm rotates through. So again, focus is scapular movement, understanding how to utilize the muscles in your back and to help minimize this shape as the athlete loads the arm back. Cool. So cruising through here, the hip to trunk relationship, you call it separation, you can call it disconnect, you can call it resistance, like whatever you want to call it. But the hip to trunk relationship is basically how the pelvis interacts with the torso. So as the pelvis rotates forward, the torso is going to hold counter rotation. So, getting a medicine ball and doing some type of medicine ball pitcher slam would be a phenomenal exercise for this. Doing a partner medicine ball throw where one partner is throwing, one partner is catching, that's going to help force this torso into counter rotation a little bit longer. Okay, so the hip to trunk relationship, we're creating these drills. This is the half kneel turn and throw, which I love for infielders going to the backhand side. And it's really awesome for young kids to be like, hey, kneel down, face that way, stand up and turn and throw at a target. Now all of a sudden they're starting to move their body a little bit differently, and you're not really saying like, hey, let's work on your hip to trunk relationship today. And the 10-year-old athlete's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So we're trying to give these drills where it just automatically creates really powerful patterns for the positional players.
Yeah, and I'm going to interject for a second, Austin, on that one. Yeah. I know you had mentioned use it for infielders. For the infielders specifically, we use, like, one of my examples would be when your shortstop goes backhand 5-6 and has to load into that back hip and really work through some pattern and some positioning. I think this drill is phenomenal for that. And we even use it with our outfielders. And the reason we use it for that is balls on the fence. So now I'm low, I'm loaded, and I've got to find a way to, again, create that resistance, create that velocity through a pattern, through a throw. So yeah, it's great for infielders, but when I tell you we use it for everybody, we do. So, yes.
No, that's awesome. And again, you don't know where you're going to play. Like, you were 13 years old. Like, if you say you're an outfielder only, I don't believe you. But, as you get older, you're going to start to get into a refined position. But, we use this for everybody for sure. That's a good point.
I also find that with these more dynamic drills that you have, the kids love them. I mean, they're fun drills to execute.
Yeah.
So I see my kids really enjoying them when we're doing them in our progressions.
Awesome. I love it. And this one is kind of to play off of an infield version. This is more of an outfield style. Again, a ball's over your head or off the fence, something that they might pick up the ball and then turn and throw. So again, it's just giving them some different, understanding of how their body is moving, how to rotate more efficiently versus just like a static, hey, let's play catch for 5 minutes and not get better. So, so this is the reverse rocker throw. We use it for outfielders. Again, I talk about outfield pattern, and I feel like outfield's throwing mechanics are, for whatever reason, really weird and awkward. And like, outfielders' arms get so far away from their body when they throw. So I've been using the term scale the body with the ball, which really helps kind of engage their lat, their serratus, and all the muscles that stabilize the scap, and kind of scale the body, and it stays nice and tight, and the arm doesn't get so far away from their center of mass that they kind of have no idea where their arm is in space. So scaling the body with the ball is something that I've talked about, and it's really starting to click with some of our athletes, where the ball just kind of scales right up the ribs through ball release.
And I second that. I actually watched one of Austin's videos on that. I started coining the phrase myself in our current program.
Yes.
And it really just clicks with them. It gives them, I showed a video that Austin had and really just worked that patterning, and being able to see that and then use that as a verbal cue was huge for us. So I agree as well. Again.
Cool. Awesome. I'm glad you're crushing it with with the drills. Heck yeah. Okay, so we'll talk about lead leg patterning, and there's lots of different ways to train how the lead leg stabilizes, but the whole purpose of, if you're a coach and you're watching an athlete and you're recruiting an athlete and you're seeing all these components, you're like, okay, that girl can really throw, or, oh, that girl has some issues with her arm or her front leg. Now how to attack it and train it if they end up coming to your school, or if you get them as a player from a tribal organization. But the front knee, the front leg, this whole leg is basically your stable platform to allow your hips and your torso to just accelerate and rotate forward through ball release. So if you watch this clip, like when she plants, like there's no translation forward of this leg. This is just her braking system to allow the upper body to rotate and accelerate. So we're not like aggressively trying to like straighten this knee out. Like, we're not trying to like lock it out. We're trying to just stabilize and absorb force through the hip, through the hamstring, quad, so that we can rotate better. Okay, we're not actively trying to extend that front leg, which is sometimes you see some coaches do that just to get some effect out of it. But there's a lot more than just like driving the knee or the leg into the ground. There's the strength training aspect. There's timing of when these muscles should activate. So there's a lot of things that go into it. But I wanted just to let you kind of see how that front leg stabilizes and how this knee does not translate forward. So here's a javelin throw, just something that we've utilized, give our outfielders a little bit different look, and to really focus on how that front foot attacks from above and stabilizes the ground to allow the rest of the body to rotate. And you can see, like I've tracked, have some blue circles here just to kind of show that scaling of the ball against the body as the athlete starts to rotate out. So movement requirements, and every time someone asks about a throwing program or something like a private session, it's like, well, we have to strength train as well. Like we can't just throw and forget about everything else, like our mobility, our rotational aspect, our single leg strength, our core strength. Like that stuff has to go hand in hand with any throwing program. So of course, you're going to have some throwing issue, sequence issues or arm pathway issues, whatever that might be, but we also have to strengthen it. And Brittany's going to talk about that too. And, shoulder strength and how we actually stabilize a joint through a very aggressive movement. So, what does their warm-up look like? Can they hinge? Can they do a lunge? Can they do a side lunge? Can they actually rotate? When I say dissociate, I mean, can they separate their pelvis and their torso doing certain movements? Can they control the shoulder joint? And then will a drill get them moving better? And sometimes it's just as simple as giving them a different look, a different drill that gets their body moving in the right way. So here are a couple drills and prep work pieces that we do. Again, whether you're hitting or throwing, these are really powerful drills. So the top left, we have just a Spider-Man T-spine, just really focusing on rotating from this mid-thoracic spine. The top right, we have this thing called a 3-point contact Y, where we're just exploring our shoulder blade and making sure that, our bodies are feeling okay for that day. So, if you're doing this drill and your right arm is bothering you and you're a righty thrower, probably shouldn't throw that day. So these are all drills that these girls can use to self-assess. The bottom left is a supine twist. We use this as an assessment piece, but also as a warm-up. We want to see if these athletes can control their pelvis, can dissociate pelvis and torso while maintaining this arm straight up, so the hands directly over the shoulder. So this is a really nice dissociation piece, assessment piece, hip mobility, whatever you want to call it. It's something that we've incorporated for our everydays. And then the bottom right is just an adductor rocker, just to kind of explore and understand how that tissue is feeling for that day. And we use this in the throwing type progression as well for infielders. I don't have a demo on here, but I know Sarah could probably talk about that as well. But for infielders, we want to learn to explore how our torso changes during our throwing motion. So we've used this adductor rocker drill as a kind of a progression to on the run throws and angle throws. Here are a couple patterning drills. So we'll go for our warm-ups, then we kind of get into more of our patterning drills. And again, it's going to be different for everybody. The coaches are kind of understanding, with the assessment piece, what their needs are, what the players' needs are. So we have kind of 3 different drills. So we have the top 2. This bottom right one is the same one as the top right, but just a different view. So we have this water bottle drill where the athlete is, feeling how their arm is moving by allowing the water to shift within the bottle. So we've used this with a lot of our return to throw athletes prior to them actually releasing a ball. So some of our, athletes that are post-surgery that have, cleared their PT, now ready to get their return to throw program, we'll do a lot of these patterning drills, but we'll also do this water bottle drill. So they have some resistance, but they're not actually releasing it. So, the goal for this is to keep the water at the top and then let it shift back to the bottom as you rotate your body. So it's a really easy way to just feel how the arm is moving through space, through the throwing zone. The one on the right and underneath it, so these are just really basic scap rolls, we call them. So the athlete is feeling their shoulder blade a couple times and then blending their torso and their glove side with it. So, this is definitely not an L drill. It's definitely not a wrist flick. So when people see it, they're like, this is really weird. Why am I doing that? But when you have a girl that throws 74 miles an hour overhead, at 5'6", 140 pounds, that there's a really good sequencing, a really good sequence that's happening. So, we are focused on how do we pattern the body to maximize velocity. We're not just chasing velocity by just throwing as hard as we can. We're chasing velocity through patterning, which also helps with accuracy and command. So those are those drills. The one on the left, this bottom left drill, is just a way to explore femoral movement and how that pairs with our pelvis rotating. So you can see the right hip, that right femur kind of drives in a little bit, and then the pelvis starts to work forward again. So it's a little choppy, but you might be able to see that first clip there. And again, we're just trying to pattern this. Oops, sorry about that. And let's just do that one more time. So the right hip, there's some femoral internal rotation to set the pelvis, to set the torso, to set the arm. That there's going to be lifts in here. I can't do a presentation without any lifts. It's just not happening. So the guaranteed to be in your program lifts, we hammer weight, we do deadlifts, we do front squats, we do a lot of single legs, we do rows, we do a lot of different things. Dumbbell rows, athletic landmine presses to build rotational power. We have some cable chops just for some anti-rotation movements and core stability. We have reverse lunges, all right, front grip reverse lunges for single leg strength. And then we have some Cossack squats that we do for hip mobility. This is a really challenging exercise. That's a 16-pound med ball and crazy single leg strength. So these are going to be guaranteed to be in your program. So if you're not doing these in some capacity, you're missing out on some really key components of your training. Almost done here. Almost done, Caitlyn. Okay, so here's a scoring system that I've used, when I'm evaluating athletes, or if coaches, go recruiting and they're trying to understand, if they should be recruited or not, or if they have a lot of work on their hands moving forward. So 0 to 5 scale. If you have pain in the shoulder or had an injury, or you're below the average velocity by 10 miles an hour. So average velocities, let's just say high school, let's just say it's 55. Okay. College, let's just say 58, 60. NPF is probably 63 now, or higher. So let's just kind of use those numbers as baselines. They could be, plus or minus 2 or 3. I'm not sure what the 2020 or 2019 numbers were, but 0 to 1 if there's pain, or below by 10 miles an hour. If they score 2, they have multiple significant mechanical flaws. So let's say their arm action doesn't work well, their front leg isn't stable, and let's say that their arm shape is 100, almost 100, straight out, 180 degrees, 40 degrees, let's just say 140. That would be a score of a 2, and they're below by 6 or 9 miles an hour. A 3 would be minimal mechanical flaws, below the average by 2 or 5 miles an hour. 4s and 5s would be you see a girl, she has a clean throwing pattern. She throws hard just by hearing and seeing. So those are minimal mechanical flaws, and either above the average velocity or kind of right at that velocity. So I've used a scale just to kind of help categorize your athletes and put them into buckets when you're doing some recruiting and scouting. So practical application, everyone's going to be different between a practice setting, a game setting, a training session. There's lots of different variations that we're going to use the program for. So we always start with our prep work, our activation, and our patterning. So we have our adductor rockers, 3-point contact Y, some T-spine mobility. Then we have our patterning and maybe med ball throws. Then we get into our drills. And again, personally, I love the double kneeling. I love the staggered and the pivots. Like those are kind of my go-tos. I would choose maybe 1 or 2 to get started. And then the drill options 5 through 9. Again, I love the half kneel turn and throw. I love the reverse rocker. We've used the double hop before. We can create some variations within these drills, but those are kind of my go-tos, my startups, and then I go from there. So just a nice clean sheet to utilize in your training, while you're obviously at home now, but things you can do on the field, in groups or small circuits, things like that at your practice. So I just have a couple clips and then we can get rolling. I know it's a little later, but I could talk a lot. So here's an example outfielder throwing. And Sarah, this is what we talked about with scaling the body with the ball, how this cue really, really helped this athlete before her arm was super extended out. I don't have the clip before, but this ball is staying really close to the body and working back to gain access to her serratus, her lat, scapular movement, but also as that rear hip starts to turn in. So this is a really critical piece. She's not forcing it. It's just a natural movement. It works in to set the pelvis to let the arm unravel through ball release. This is funny. I posted this video. It was an 8th grader throwing 68 miles an hour. And there were so many comments of like, oh, it was terrible throwing mechanics. And I'm like, what's so terrible about it? A girl throws 68 and is sequenced like incredibly. You can see glove side works out, right arm loads back femur turns in, front leg is like stable. This was an incredible throw, perfect sequence, like very good rotational athlete. And just to kind of give you an example of what we're looking for through arm shape, lead leg stability, back hip movement, there's just some really interesting things that are happening. And if you see your athletes that don't do similar patterns, you know that some type of sequence is off. Mm-hmm. I have 2 videos here. I'm just going to kind of let this play out. This girl had a really low elbow slot to start. I'll start this over. So kind of a sidearm pushing athlete. You can see that the elbow drifts really far out in front, doesn't really understand scapular movement. So we did some different types of drills. We had a 2-pound ball in her hand. We just did some load throws. We really didn't allow her to throw this until her pattern started to clean up. We did some tennis racket throws, which is, again, people look at you like, oh, you're an idiot. What are you doing? But for this athlete, it really helped her feel the forearm unravel through ball release. We did staggered stance throws, which is just the right foot forward, which allows the torso to counter rotate against the hips. Arm coming through. We did some scat load rockers, just kind of rocking back. And you can kind of see some of her changes. This was in, just 2 days of patterning, which was a really incredible change for her, from that to a little bit higher 3/4 arm slot with no pain. Before there was lots of pain, lots of pain. Here's an interesting one, guys. The last one I wanted to end with.
Wow.
Like, yeah. And again, a pitcher that, obviously goes overhead and kind of has a different pattern, but the two get kind of blended together. And you see that again with like pitcher first baseman or pitcher outfielder, that they're doing this movement and then they're trying to throw. So it gets kind of blended. But this was like, arm goes up. Like, I don't know what was going on. But she made some incredible changes in, like, this was session 1 to 3. So it was like 3 weeks that we did. She had her in-home program. You know, she was with me once or twice a week. Or I think once a week for the first 3 weeks, and then she increased to 2. But this bottom right clip, loading the back hip, timing is right. What's really critical and really fun to see is how her torso carries, in the bottom right, how her torso carries the arm into shoulder external rotation, where in this clip, the arm kind of pushes forward with the torso. So you see that a lot. Like, maybe the athlete has really good hip movement and really strong in the lower half, but the arm and the torso come forward at the same time. So they're losing sequential movement. So that was something that really stood out to me, of how the torso carries the arm into shoulder external rotation.
That is crazy, amazing change in such a short time. That's
Crazy. It was
super impressive.
Yeah, that was, I mean, and again, she did her in-home stuff. So, like, you know, who knows if she didn't do it, but she was really eager to change that pattern. So, yeah. I think we have a prize, maybe.
Woo!
We do. Okay, so let's see. The next prize is going to be a set of Wasserman's lightning training balls.
Yeah.
So these are weighted balls that we had a question about. That Austin, do you want to explain these?
Yeah, somebody actually asked about these. They wanted to know about them.
Yeah. So it's I'm launching them. I've had this, you know, idea for about 5 or 6 years. You know, I wanted to focus on patterning, you know, using normal softballs, and I've been using weighted objects since 2008 when I first started training athletes. So we've been using them on kind of small scales at our facility, and, you know, in travel clinics, where it really helps to understand where the arm is in space and where the arm is in relation to the body. That's like the whole purpose of some of these weighted implements, is once the athlete has a different object in their hand, they might not revert back to that poor pattern that they've had in the past. So it's a constraint. It's another stimulus where now they have something in their hand that's different than a softball that their brain is now aware of, and where their arm is in space. So we have there's 4 to the set. There's 2 pound, 1 pound, which we really only use for, you know, shoulder stability, cuff work, different types of strengthening drills. Then we have a 9 ounce and a 7 ounce, which, you know, 7 ounces is a standard size. And it's the 12-inch, 3.8 inch diameter, normal to a regulation softball. So, you know, for, you know, our facility in New Hampshire, where, you know, in New England, we can't get outside. So, you know, being able to throw inside in a facility or at your house really helps and improves and speeds up the process of learning. So, you know, those are what we utilize them for. When you purchase them, there's a free training manual that has every ball, or the 4 balls, and every drill that we utilize it for and why. So that's the lightning ball training set, a set of 4 with different weights used for, you know, a variety of prep work, patterning, actual throws, and then cuff and scap stability.
Nice.
So you mentioned not being able to get outside in the New Hampshire facility, and Sarah's nodding like this, but also it's a great time to have these kind of at-home tools, right? When we're all stuck at home. So that
Yeah, and it kind of just worked out that this was the timing of when I was releasing them. So I was, you know, it kind of worked out. But yeah, it's definitely another great tool. Just like any other thing is another tool. How you implement that is the important aspect of it. But again, it's just another tool to help with your in-home training and with your training, you know, at practices and in private sessions, small groups, college environments, things like that.
Awesome. All right. So our next winner is Barbara Burnett. Barbara Burnett, thank you for being here. You've won a set of Wasserman's lightning training balls. So shoot me an email, ccain@texasblaze.org. You can also find my email in the chat section, and we will get that prize over to you.
Awesome.
All right, Austin, thank you so much for everything. We're going to pass it on now to Brittany Schaeffer. So Brittany was a professional softball player, LSU softball player, and is now a physical therapist. So she's going to take over.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank y'all for joining us. So like Austin, I can definitely talk for days on end about everything I'd want to go over, whether it's physical therapy, injury prevention, softball. So I've tried to condense it into some of the key points that I always try to stress, not just to the patients that I treat, because I mostly treat young athletes, and whether it's pre-op, post-op, or just your general overuse injuries. But especially all the softball girls that I train, I try to implement some of this stuff to possibly be a new lifestyle change in how they are warming up, how they're strengthening, and just overall taking care of their bodies. So the first thing I want to talk about with this injury prevention is stretching. So everyone knows this is something we need to do, and I love that Austin talked about it, is static versus dynamic. We have tried to live in this static world for so long, but we really want to try and make the push for dynamic. So whenever we warm up, if people don't really know the difference between static and dynamic, static is your typical stretch and hold, where dynamic, you've kind of got that repetitive movement. So if, instead of doing a standing quad stretch, that's where you would rather do butt kicks. Or for your upper body, making sure you're not just doing the whole stretch across your body and hold it for 10, 30 seconds. You would rather do any kind of arm circles or something like that. You want to make sure you're doing something that is repetitive movement, because that's the world we live in. We don't ever play softball with our bodies in one position. We're always rotating. So if we can try and get from that static towards dynamic, it's great for multiple reasons, because many people don't realize that static stretching will actually decrease your force production. So your power is going to now go down. If you're trying to get ready for a big game and you've done all these hamstring stretches and you're stretching out your shoulder, well, now you've, especially a pitcher, you've already kind of lost a couple miles an hour potentially if you're overstretching your arm. You don't get that nice whip at the end. But on the positive side for dynamic, it's going to increase your blood flow, but it's also going to prepare your muscles for what we call a quick stretch, those explosive movements, which again, in softball, that's all we do. Everything is as explosive as possible, whether you're throwing or hitting, pitching, everything is fast and explosive. So dynamic warm-ups are that's what prepares your body to do what it needs to do for our sport. And for some people, what you can try to do is actually turn what is a typical static warm-up or a stretch, turn that into dynamic. So I have a lot of girls ask me, well, what do I do? How do I stretch my shoulder? Well, instead of doing all these motions of holding it or having your partner hold and stretch your shoulder, do internal and external rotation, instead of doing a constant hold or anything like this, I will do this internal and external rotation, just kind of quick repetitive movements, so that way my rotator cuff is warmed up in that sense. So again, now that I tell people try and do just dynamic, they ask, okay, so when do I stretch? So if you are going to stretch, have it be after your practice, after your competition, after you've completed the task, you've done your dynamic, you've gone into your game, you've done your practice session, now is whenever you can go back and stretch. The key with the stretching though is you got to look at there's a spectrum of flexibility. So you have on the one end, you have people who are very tight, don't have any flexibility whatsoever. Then you go towards the middle of the scale where someone is, quote, normal with their flexibility. They are able to get just the right amount of range of motion that they need. Then you start getting into the people who are flexible. And at the very end of the scale, you have what we consider hypermobile. So obviously, if someone is tight, yes, we need to make sure we stretch them. You want to get them back to what normal is. They don't need to be super flexible. We just need them within that normal range so that their muscles can move the way that they should move. But someone who is hypermobile, this is something that's a little bit more extensive. It's something that I actually see all the time, not just in patients, but in my athletes, especially my pitchers. So whenever you talk about hypermobility, it's not just your muscles and your tendons, it's also your ligaments. So for a muscle and tendon, that's what we're trying to focus on when we stretch. Well, those can recoil, meaning you go and stretch several weeks straight, you get better at your flexibility, and now you go months without stretching. Oh, well, now you're tight again. Ligaments don't act in that way. Once a ligament is stretched, it will stay that way. So this is one of the things that, unfortunately, hypermobility is a genetic factor. So mom and dad, that's your fault. Kids say thank you. But there is a way that we can try and work on that. And the main reason we want to try and decrease this hypermobility as much as possible is because now you're at an increased risk for injury. And because that's happening because now you have this extra movement in your shoulder. So instead of having this normal range of motion If your ligament's loose and now our shoulder is doing this, well, that you can easily see where we would be at increased risk for any kind of shoulder injury happening. And this could be throughout your entire body. So I'm going to pull up something if you're wondering, okay, well, how do I assess myself? How do I know if I'm hypermobile? I'm going to show you this picture here. This is what we call the BRITTANY score. So right here, can everyone see it? You have the picture showing different body parts. It's a scale of 0 to 9. And what you would do is assess each one of these, and you give yourself a point if you do it. So of course, for your thumb, you would see, can your thumb touch your forearm? Check each side. If it does, you give yourself a point for each one. Then going over here, you would check your pinky. Does your pinky bend back 90 degrees from your wrist? From your elbow, if you lock your elbow out, is it more than 10 degrees? And again, this is something that I don't expect y'all to measure. You can clearly see if you extend your elbow, oh, there's a little bit of bump in the middle. It shouldn't do that. Then same thing with the knees. I'm sure a lot of people notice this in their knees, that they go backwards more than they should. And then finally, this is just one point here. With your knees straight, can you bend over and put your palms flat on the floor? And you can see here how her spine is actually what's getting most of the movement. You'll see that the knees will tend to do this while they're in this position, but the biggest thing is you'll see almost their spine, instead of being a nice controlled curve, it just goes straight down. All right. So whenever you're looking at that, that's how you can, after you assess it, okay, I got 6 out of 9. Well, the score based on the BRITTANY score, if you have 4 out of 9, you are considered hypermobile. And so everyone's like, oh, well, now that if you say I'm hypermobile, I'm not supposed to stretch, what do I do? So like I said, I don't want them to continue stretching, because they're just going to continue to loosen things we don't want to loosen. If you can drop into the splits without even stretching, then you don't need to stretch anything. Clearly, we have plenty of mobility. So what I tell them instead is, I want you guys to strengthen. You need to make sure you're strengthening all the muscles around your joint, because your muscles are contractile tissue. You can try and work those back in to try and make yourself tighter. Even though we can't make the ligament shrink, we can at least get everything around it strong to help stabilize. And this is actually one thing I see it all the time, especially being a physical therapist. I tend to people watch, and I see it all the time. So a lot of you listening in, I'm sure you might, if you notice it or might not notice it, when you are standing in a position, if your knees are locked and your knees are shooting backwards, you need to stop right now. You need to learn how to stand normal, let your muscles work, and not rely on your ligaments to hold your body in place. So going away from the stretching, I want to now transition into shoulder range of motion. This is actually a huge thing, and something that actually gets misconstrued a lot with the information. So talking about internal and external rotation. So for those of you who don't know, internal rotation is moving forward, external is back. And as you can see with me, that is absolutely as far as I can go. But if you were to stretch me in the other direction, I can go just about 90 degrees backwards. So the reason this is a huge ordeal is, all that matters is, do you have 120 degrees of total range of motion, adding them both together? Some people try and say, oh, you need to make sure that that shoulder goes all the way down. Well, if you have 180 degrees, no, you don't. And especially overhead athletes, we always tend to have more external rotation than internal rotation. And this is where you'll be termed something that we call GERD. I'm going to pull up another picture for you guys to see. So this is where you can see for GERD, it just stands for glenohumeral, which is just your shoulder, internal rotation deficit. So if you look at this picture right here, you can see 180 degrees total. So adding internal and external rotation, 180 degrees, that's totally normal. And then here you could just see it's the same thing for total range of motion. So if you look at the difference between these two pictures, there's 70 and 110, and this one you have 45, 135. Both of them are 180 degrees. This one has more external rotation, but they are still healthy. These are normal shoulders. When you go into this one up here, that's 160 degrees. Yes, that's one that you need to make sure you stretch. Typically, it's going to be the internal rotation. So you would want to stretch to get that extra 20 degrees. But this is where it's huge. If people see this right here and they're thinking, oh my goodness, you need to stretch because you only have 45 degrees internal rotation. But if you stretch and now become this person over here that has more than 180 degrees, now we're going back into that hypermobility, the laxity of the shoulder, that this is actually going to cause just as much problem as being tight, because now you have too much movement and now you don't have a good stability in the shoulder joint. So going back to the internal and external rotation, I just want to make sure that people understand that having GERD is not a diagnosis. I've had people go to a doctor like, oh, my shoulder hurts. They told me I have GERD. All that means is you have more external rotation than internal rotation. Just because I have GERD does not mean I have shoulder pain. So just make sure you don't get that confused with people trying to tell you your muscles are tight or your joint capsule is tight, so you need to stretch. You have 180 degrees, you're fine. That's it. You don't need to stretch. So moving out of the stretching and range of motion, I want to now go into strengthening. This is where I could really talk for a very long time. I'm not going to go over specific exercises because it would take a very long time to do this, but the goal is to make sure that you're doing the right amount of strengthening. Everyone knows when we go to the gym, you see people doing the major muscle groups. Everyone is working their legs, they're working pecs, they're working their back, their biceps, triceps, they're doing all these big muscle groups. But how many people are really focusing on these small muscle groups? Basically the muscles that help support the shoulder joint. So you've got your rotator cuff muscles, and then of course you've got what Austin talked about, your scapular stabilizer muscles. So you can go Google some of these. You've got rhomboids, your serratus anterior, all these little guys that are completely forgotten, but they're actually the big ones you need to worry about, because these are the muscles that control the movement of your shoulder. These are what help you avoid these overuse injuries, because if you are getting all these big muscle groups going, they're getting strong, but the little guys are getting forgotten. Well, now whenever we are doing more and more stuff using these big muscle groups, the little guys took a back seat and just, okay, fine, I'm done. Boom, that's when your injury hits. So now when it goes to strengthening these muscles, you need to make sure that you're going about it the right way. This is where you need to make sure, some people are comfortable just Googling exercises, but you just need to make sure you're doing going about it the right way. So if you have a personal trainer, or if you're just using your dad to help you, you can go see a physical therapist or anything like that. Just go to someone who understands the body and can properly tell you how to work these muscle groups out. There's different ways to do it, but there is a very specific way to do it. Something as simple as I's, Y's, and T's. Austin showed an example of that young lady lifting her arm up. That's a prime example of, that's a good one to do. But if you throw too much weight into your arm, well, now you're going to have the little one shut off and all the big muscles are going to try to recruit because you're not strong enough to handle the workload with that tiny little muscle. So this is where you have to make sure it's not just trying to work them out with as much weight as possible. You have to start low, do a weight that your body can handle, but make sure the form is correctly. That's actually a huge thing I see, are these exercises that look super easy. I show them how to do it and they start doing it, and all I see are them shrugging their shoulders and then trying to lift their arms like this. So you just have to make sure no matter what exercise you're working, you must have perfect form, no cheating using big muscle groups, and of course making sure that you're using good posture and actually using the muscle that's supposed to be used. So form is above all else whenever you're working on strengthening. And if I know we have a Q&A later on, and any questions you have now, if anyone has specific exercises, I'm more than happy to hand out my email or something like that to help y'all get kind of a better idea and get a head start of what the more basic exercises are for those. But just to kind of wrap it all up and come back together, overall, you got to make sure no matter how you're training, you've got to listen to your body. You need to avoid the overuse, which we see it a lot, and there's always going to be a reason why. You can look back at what you've been doing. It could be that you were practicing a lot of repetitions with bad form, or the bad form over time now led to an issue, or it could be not even softball related. It could be how you're training in the weight room. You're training with too much weight that your body can't support, or you've got bad body mechanics that over time it is going to set in, and now we got to take a seat and recover from this and go to physical therapy, see a doctor, do what we need to do to make sure that now we're healthy again. But we've now had to take several weeks off because we weren't being smart about how we were doing it. And this is a quick side note that I want, especially the parents listening in, I want y'all to understand how important it is to listen to your kids with pain. I know a lot of kids will sometimes complain about every little detail, how much it hurts. There's some that you gotta, okay, you're fine, just go back out there. But a big issue I see are people saying, oh, she's just got tendonitis, she's fine. Especially kids who have not hit puberty yet. It's very important for everyone to understand that there is a difference between tendonitis and growth plate pain. So someone like me who is older, I'm done growing. If I start getting pain around my joints, it's going to be my tendon. My tendon is getting inflamed and pulling, and that's fine. But for kids that have the strong muscles and tendons, their issues are their bones are still growing. So what seems to be the exact same, like tendonitis in the elbow or tendonitis in the knee, that's actually a strong muscle and tendon that's growing and yanking on a bone that is not fully closed. So just keep that in mind. That is something that's much worse than just simple, oh, I did too much, I've got tendonitis in my elbow, I'll be fine. It could lead to something much worse if it's not monitored. It could lead to the muscle pulling so hard that actually pulls off that little piece of the bone, not to scare anyone, but just to give you an idea of, don't let your kids continue playing with this pain. Make sure you monitor it. And if it gets to the point that what you've done with a little bit of rest, a little bit of strengthening, if that's not working, then that's when you know you need to go see a doctor or physical therapist to make sure that nothing serious is happening, and then you get on the right track.
Thank you.
Awesome. That was great, Brittany.
Mm-hmm.
Coaches, y'all got anything to add?
I think when the bait and scale that you showed, the straight leg with the knees kind of go into extension. Actually, in college, our professor, I forget our class, but our professor said if anyone can stand against the wall and, keep their knees or their heels against the wall, bring their hands or palms straight down to the ground, I'll give everybody on the final an A. And she didn't realize that there was a hypermobile athlete in there. It was a swimmer, and she went down, she did it, and all the kids freaked out because this girl could do it. And that was my first understanding of hypermobility, and that is it's a real thing. But yeah, no, it was good.
Yep. And kids, don't use that as party tricks. If you can twist your body in all different directions, stop doing that. You're making it worse.
All right,
No,
we've got another slide. Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
I'm going to back Brittany on everything she's saying just as much as I do Austin. I think what she's talking about is real, and it needs to become a staple in what we're doing as coaches, in what we're allowing our kids to get away with during their stretching time. Their body is maybe okay when I'm 12, but when you get to me, you're going to be 18 to 22, and that body's going to start shutting down if we're not taking care of it now. So understanding that it's going to move and it's going to do what we're asking it to do, but if I can take care of it on the front side and on the back side, the longevity of my body being able to play a sport that I love is going to increase tenfold. So.
Awesome. All right, Austin, the next thing we're giving away is your lightning bands. You want to explain those real quick while I find the winner?
Yeah, they're Velcro bands that have a clip onto chain link fence. Again, another way to prepare your arm, your hips for the demands of throwing. So they're lime green with the custom high-low throwing logo on them. So you can represent when you're doing your shoulder work or scap movement. There's lots of other variations that we utilize them for. Sometimes with the band exercises, kids get really aggressive with the way they move, and the quality kind of goes down. So we're utilizing them in small set and rep schemes, and making sure that the athlete is fully going through the range of motion, but also can be utilized for patterning with the arm. There's some drills that I have on on site on my website, and all the social media platforms that we can kind of show you that we can kind of pattern how the arm moves through the throwing zone. You can also attach them to your ankles and do some hip strengthening, things like that. So whoever wins, I'll be shipping them out to you.
All right, cool. Next winner, we're gonna go with, who we got here? Caitlyn Kirkhart. Caitlyn Kirkhart, you've got Austin's lightning band. Send me an email, ccain@texasblaze.org. Thank you so much for being here. Congratulations.
Nice. Good work.
All right. Now we're going to move on to Sarah O'Brien. She is the assistant coach at the University of Montana. So why don't you take us away, Sarah?
Okay, well, I feel like they mic dropped, and I'm just going to attempt to finish this out for everybody. As Caitlyn said, I'm Sarah O'Brien. I am the assistant softball coach at the University of Montana. First and foremost, I want to thank the Texas Blaze organization. I want to thank JB. I want to thank Caitlyn for setting up this space where we can talk about, in my opinion, one of the most overlooked, untaught, and probably mistaught parts of our game. And Austin kind of mentioned that earlier, and that's throwing and how our athletes are throwing and how we're teaching them to throw. So similar to Caitlyn's story, I met Austin 5 years
I think it was
ago.
2016.
Oh, dear God. Okay, so we're both old. I met Austin a long time ago. And I'm sure as the people who are watching, if you haven't heard Austin speak before, it's a little mind-blowing to listen to him dive into the biomechanics and the research and the data and just how the body is moving. So when I met Austin and he threw all of that my way, pun intended, I was completely bought in, and I have now implemented high-level throwing. I usually abbreviate it to HLT. Into 3 different collegiate programs. The results that I've seen as far as our athletes' ability to create effective pathways, again, something that Austin mentioned, developing those various arm slots based on proper arm shape, again, kind of paralleling back to what Austin said, and then using their bodies effectively, creating that resistance, that hip to trunk relationship that he mentioned, to aid in creating velocity. And in each program that I've implemented it into, the whole team, their velo overhand increased tenfold. I would assume that some of your first questions to this would be, does it actually work? Because some of the things that he's saying, when I heard it first, I was like, this guy's crazy. And now I just get people to tell me this lady's crazy. And I'm like, I'm not crazy, it works. So yes, it does work. I think you could probably talk to quite a few college coaches who have implemented this into their programs, travel ball coaches implementing it into their programs. So I'm just going to share a few success stories that have happened within the programs that I've been in, because I think the more applicable that you can make it to us, the more you're going to understand. So when I first met Austin, day one, I had an athlete who was no longer a part of the team. But when I tell you that this athlete could not throw overhand for a significant distance whatsoever, we're talking like she would need a double cut from the fence to second base. And I had done, in my opinion, everything that I could to really assist this athlete in trying to make her throwing patterns better, and I was just falling short. And then, of course, Austin shows up 10 minutes later. She's throwing BBs across the gym, and I'm like, what in the world is happening? Okay, cool. I'm totally bought in. And pretty much ever since that day, I have been a huge advocate for Austin. I also asked one of my—
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Love you. Shout out. I also asked one of my former athletes if I could share her pain to no pain story. Brittany talks about pain. Austin kind of talks about the ineffective shapes and body positions we put our athletes in. They get pain. Pain is natural to the positions that we put them in prior to changing the way that we threw. And this athlete's response was kind of funny, so I'm literally going to quote her. She said, "Yes, of course, please. If this will help someone else's elbow feel like it's not going to detach every time they throw, please use it." And I chuckle, and you guys all chuckle, because I mean, we've all been there, and it works. It worked time and time again. I'll use another kind of example with that. Had another athlete that had incredible UCL issues, and we couldn't figure it out. And I'm just like, let's just change what we're doing. Let's change our shape. We've got to eliminate the longevity of your shape. And through this whole transition of adding high-level throwing, again, she went pain to no pain. So all of these things, the quote from the athlete, this is all true. Multiple athletes, UCL issues, multiple athletes, labrum, rotator cuff. I mean, we talk about it. Austin talked about it. That's a huge number of injured kids. and going into this high level throwing regimen and really being militant with it has created pain-free throwing and significantly more velo to all of the athletes that I have coached and implemented this into the programs. And it's going to be honest with you, it's more velo than I ever thought they could throw. So kudos to, again, this system that you can add to your program. Kind of coming on from the PT side, Britt, we had an athlete who was coming back from a shoulder surgery. So when she got into her throwing and being able to implement, we used high level throwing. So we used our drills, or Austin's drills, obviously throwing at a 50%, not throwing at 100, not trying to kill the kid day one. But using variations of the drills that we'll go over here in a little bit. And I am proud to say that she has made a full recovery and is killing it in the game all before this all happened. So it definitely worked. And so being able to work hand in hand with our athletic trainer and kind of implement high level throwing into her rehab was a pretty cool thing to see. And then obviously it's just continuing to prove effective. Anything you guys want to add from that standpoint?
Oh, those are great stories. Like, I love hearing that stuff, the pain to no pain, and, you know, being able to implement the system the right way, and, you know, knowing when to back off and to add certain, you know, drills and volumes and things like that, where, you know, you have the system and the coach is there to implement it, and you've done a phenomenal job, you know, obviously the past couple of years of like going after it hard and changing the way that your athletes throw. And, you know, clearly it's been really great for them. So that's awesome.
And that's why it's so great to start it as early as it can. Because I mean, if we can fix this while they're kids, we don't have this issue. We don't have to worry about having surgery in college because we had great throwing mechanics as a little one. Now we just have that all the way through. If we could fix that from the get-go, then we would have a lot less injuries. And at the same time, I mean, you've got, catching and throwing is the first thing you learn as a kid. And the first thing they start learning is what injures them.
Yeah,
right.
You're not wrong. So kind of to dive back in, one of the things that Caitlyn asked me to do was kind of discuss the variations of HLT that I've implemented into the different programs. I'm going to specifically talk about and just kind of the staples and the variations that we do within our program on a day-to-day throwing basis. I love when Austin goes, well, we hit 7 times a week, so why are we 6? We have a day off during season.
Yep, there you go.
6. We need to be throwing, and we need to be throwing at all of those days. So we obviously start with our dynamic warm-up. So Brittany kind of touched on that earlier. So anytime we're going to go into practice, we're going to be doing a dynamic warm-up. We're warming up the body as a whole before we ever break down into anything throwing specific. I know, Austin, we just gave away a set of HLT bands. So we use bands. We use those bands. And we also, again, doing that not to just throw rubber bands around and have a great time. I mean, we're working flexion to extension. We're working on activating scaps, activating, again, like Brittany's talking about, the small muscles in our shoulders that we neglect, that need to be warmed up for our bodies to work effectively through our patterning of our throw. So again, doing some band work, we'll do some scap activation progressions, because one thing that I found when I started teaching this, kids don't know how to activate their scaps. And so really breaking that down and what that feels like, what that looks like, and then we can kind of move through things from there. But I think if we don't understand what the body is supposed to be doing, we can't teach the throw. So once we get through the bands, we get through the scap activation, all of those things, we go into pump throws. That's what we call our arm behind throws. And then we're going to activate the scap. We're going to set the scap. We're going to clear the glove, working chest, and then we're going to fire and finish over the top. So we're going to, again, and we'll do our pump throws from our knee. I know Austin touched on it. A lot of us as coaches taught kids to throw from a knee. Yes, we did that. And he touched on it, but I want to make sure that we heard it. So as a right-handed thrower, my right knee is going to be in the air. It's not going to be my left knee. And the point of that is I've got to be able to create that resistance. So if my right knee is in the air, as I turn into that scap pinch, I'm going to feel a ton of tension in that trunk torso area. That's going to, again, just aid in creating that velocity without me having to throw my shoulder out my first drill. So anytime we're doing a pump throw from our knee, anytime we're doing something from our knee, or whatever hand you throw with, then that knee needs to be in the air. And that's one big shift that happened with the way that I teach throwing, because we always just went, if I'm a right-handed thrower, left knee's gonna go up. So just switch that. It's gonna be weird, it's gonna be awkward. People are like, she's crazy. I'm like, no, I'm not, just feel resistance, we can do this. Then after that, we usually go into our setup throws. I know Austin didn't mention these. We call them the new wrist flick because this motion doesn't happen in a throw, okay? So I usually make the joke, if you brush your teeth and you opened a car door and you ate some lunch today, your wrist is warm, you don't need to warm it up anymore. So we are going to do pump throw, or our setup throws. So we're gonna set, we're gonna elevate and activate, again, getting into that scap pinch. We're gonna clear and we're gonna fire and we're gonna finish. So we go pumps, we go setups, and then we go into those staggered stance throws that Austin's talking about. We go into pivot throws that he talks about. Going into our half kneeling turn and throws. Again, he talks about it. We go into our reverse rocker throws. Again, I do what he says, guys. It works. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel here.
No, you're doing great. You got it down like you know your drills. You know your drills.
6 years, we're killing it.
I know.
And then we'll go and kind of put it all together. And at that point, it's not really a drill. It's just going to be our bodies moving through things at 60 feet. Really making sure we're working our instep, squaring the hips, feeling the resistance, and continuing to move. Once we get past 60, this is going to be full group, so we have not split positions whatsoever. We're going to go into some double shuffle throws, and we're going to do those around 70 feet, because I like to say bodies in motion need to stay in motion. There's never a chance that I'm going to get the perfect ground ball at shortstop. I'm going to sit on my heels, I'm going to slightly turn my shoulders, and I'm going to fire to first. Like, that's not reality. That's not how our game is played. So we want to make sure we're moving through catch, transition, transfer, field, fire. After our double shuffles, that's when we'll kind of split. Outfielders will go into their double hop throws. Austin mentioned those. They'll go into some field and fire work with ground balls. Mondays, they throw for distance. So we'll go height and distance, trying to build, obviously, their arm strength. They have the longest throw in the field. And then for infielders, they go into those adduction throws and those double kneeling throws. So those are probably my favorite thing. I think, JB, you mentioned it, like your kids just love to do some of these drills. My kids love adduction throws. Like, how low can I take my slot? I mean, obviously my shape's gonna stay the same, but how much can I change my slot and really play with those release points? Me personally, I like to sing "How Low Can You Go" because I think it's fun and I think it's funny, and they just have fun with it. So again, completely transitioning into a new thought of throwing, but at the same time, once they start seeing that feedback, and that feedback comes pretty quickly, they're bought in. And again, 3 programs later, we're still pretty bought in. I'm bought in, my kids are bought in, and it's just it's something significant. Anything to add, Austin?
That was awesome. That was very well thought out and described, and kind of how your process is for your players, from warm up to prep work and activation to drills as a team, and then drills broken down by position. And again, like we were talking about, like high level throwing as a framework. So if you're working within this arm pathway and arm shape and sequential movement, like you can start to get creative and, vary away from these standard drills. And, you might see something with your athlete that's not a drill that we do, but it's a variation of it. But you understand that, hey, this might help this kid. Like, that's awesome. Like, the more creative we can get, based on these foundational pathways, like, that's awesome. And again, like when you're getting to the more elite athletes or the athletes that have played for a long time, you can start to get really, really detailed with how you explain it to your athletes, but also like you can get to more complex drills and arm slots and angle throws and, throwing from the knees as a catcher and, even from an infielder, like throwing from the knees and, diving and making a play and adding ground balls and fly balls to the outfield. Like that all has to happen. Like we're just talking about kind of the framework and the foundational patterns first before you start to get complex. And I think you've done a phenomenal job, like in every aspect of your coaching, career with high level throwing. And it's getting better and better and better. And obviously your athletes are, should be excited that they have this opportunity to learn from you. So that's, that's good.
There you go. JB,
Also,
you going to add?
I was just going to say, I think this is important for all of our travel ball players and coaches and parents listening. If we're fortunate, we may have a very compressed season. We may get a month and a half. We don't know. Hopefully we'll get a month and a half or 2. And obviously that means a lot of kids have had a lot of time off. And if you've taken all this time off from throwing and then you jump right back in to full on, which it will be because you're going to be right into the big tournaments and everything else, and you haven't done anything to condition your arm, I could see potential injuries really spiking because people are coming back with arms that haven't been trained for 2 months, and all of a sudden they're trying to play the game at the full speed. So I think if you don't have that throwing routine already at home right now in your remote training, this is a great time to start because I think it's going to be super important.
I think there's injuries occur when there's, a lot of time off and then you ramp up right away. So like, summer season, maybe you played a long summer season and then you shut down and then you go into fall season and you haven't prepared yourself the right way. There could be a breakdown there. Also, like for college, girls that are home for winter break and then getting back into, their preseason team sessions and individuals, and the volume and intensity starts to increase really fast because the season's here. So, kind of this weird time right now, we're all shut down, but like JB said, like we could start, soon, and all of a sudden, like we have a month or 3 weeks to, to prepare before we play. So, now's the time to do those little things, strengthen your shoulder. You're doing body weight stuff at home, or you're on a program, whether it's remote training or you're seeing a trainer, one-on-one, again, with this kind of weird time. So, now's the time to really just start, you don't have to go crazy and just do every single drill, like start to progress into it, ease into it. But again, if you know that this downtime is here and we could potentially ramp up pretty fast, like there's things that you can do during the week at home daily that you can prepare yourself for, and just, give yourself the best chance to succeed and, play for a longer time.
No, 100%.
Sarah, I had a similar situation with meeting Austin, and I had a throwing warm up that I'd done for years and showed it to him, and his feet, okay, this is awesome. This is terrible. Never do this again. Okay. So he picked it apart and helped us really develop a system. And so now we use that warm up with Texas Blaze United teams. Mm-hmm. So that is going to be we're doing a 30-day online training with them. So that's going to be uploaded for them. In their One Softball app, guys, you all will get that high level training throwing warm up, but we're happy to share it with anybody. Mm-hmm. So if you're interested in seeing it, you can always email me, ccain@texasblaze.org, and I can give that to you. But Austin also has a ton of free resources. I don't know if you want to mention that, Austin. I know you shared your library recently.
Yeah. I mean, I tried to put as much free content out as possible since, 2011 or 12, and when I really started to write and research and ask a lot of questions. So there's, on highlevelthrowing.com, there's lots of free articles, free books. I just posted my free video library for athletes at home to train. There's strength training. There's, body weight stuff, mobility, cuff, scap stability. There's a whole bunch of stuff. There's some throwing drills in there as well. So I just wanted to give everyone an opportunity to, utilize this time efficiently. So you can hop on there as well, or shoot me an email. I can send you a link over. But yeah, I mean, the more athletes that know how to train their bodies and the more coaches that have an appreciation, for that, the better I think the game is going to get, and the younger athletes are really going to develop and explode once the time is right. So
Yeah, I mean, I think Brittany said it best, and I think she said it, and it was in my notes, and I was like, great job. Defense in its simplest form is throwing and catching. Like, that's what it is. That's what the game is. And I think if we're talking about rec ball, we're talking about travel ball, we're talking about the elite levels of softball, professional softball. Throwing can't be a social hour, and that's kind of what it's turned into. If I'm going to catch up on my day, I'm going to do all these things. This is what I did with my friends. This is how my first period went. It's got to be a time for instruction and intentional instruction. So I think, again, in this time of uncertainty, we've got a ton of time for intentional instruction.
Yeah, well
but
put.
again, when we get to practice, that's what it has to become. High level throwing can completely transform the way that you throw. I think, Austin, I'm going to toot your horn because I think it works. And I think the amount of success that I've seen in my athletes and you taking the time to really dive into those things and give all of the free articles and your videos. And I mean, that I learn something from you every time we talk. I learn something from you every time I go on your website, because you know what you're talking about. So if we can really buy into throwing as much as we buy into hitting, defense is pretty significant. Like defense, like air is not good, like throwing air is terrible. So if we can find a way to have that intentionality on the defensive side of the ball, specifically in throwing, then I think our game is going to elevate in a way that we haven't seen it. So I'm very excited for that.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I would like to add that, we've been fortunate, with the Texas Blaze. Austin, you've come and done some clinics for our kids, and I know you do that for lots of programs out there. But after every one of those, the parents, the kids, there's so many people that comment on just, how much they really enjoyed it and how much they learned. Because again, you don't see a lot of that going on out there with the real specialized throwing stuff. So, your clinics have been amazing for our program. So we really appreciate everything you do.
Thank you, man. That means a lot. I appreciate that. That really does. So, I'm trying to give back as much as possible and learn as well and evolve, as, I do more clinics and I get more questions from those types of clinics. And, I just recognize that there was an issue in throwing, and I'm glad like we're at this point talking about throwing, because it's important and it's fun. And, we all have our like positions that we love to see throwing athletes throw from. So it's really cool to see that. I appreciate, you bringing me in to work with your players and with you and giving the opportunity to, make a difference. So
absolutely
cool.
Perfect.
You got anything else, Sarah?
No, I honestly was going to just close it out with kind of what we said as a group. So this will be my time to leave everybody, but I want to again just thank Caitlyn and JB for putting this on. Again, throwing is significant and it matters, and we need to teach it well. So if we can get this knowledge, we don't need to be ignorant about it anymore. We need to change what we're doing and change the way we're teaching throwing, because at the end of the day, Brittany's going to have a lot more patience until we decide that we're going to teach kids to throw the right way.
I will
Brittany,
always have a job.
I know that is job security for you right now. Softball throwing is job security. But again, thank you guys. Thank you everyone for listening, and everyone have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Sarah.
Absolutely. Bye,
Have a
guys.
good night.
All right, awesome. So we're going to hop into our Q&A portion now. We've got a few questions that have come in. If anybody else wants to ask, just drop them in the chat feature or on Facebook Live. You can ask them there as well. And then after Q&A, we're going to close out and do our final prize giveaway. So first question here. This was about, I think, Wasserman, you may have answered this in the chat, but just so everyone can hear. She asked about the arm behind the head. Are you also getting the player to feel sequence of torso rotation first before arm sequence?
Yeah, exactly. And there's going to be some overlap of movements and some blended movements, but the focus on the arm behind setup is to explore trunk rotation first before the arm and the glove side kind of move back. So yeah, we're definitely kind of hammering rotational movement from the torso, not just bringing the arm back, like slowly rotating and then starting to separate and kind of feeling the variations of that.
Kayla asks about the training balls. Can you buy them in bulk, and how much are they?
Yeah, so I'm doing a pre-order right now. Delivery is May 20th. So it's a little bit away before they are here. But they're going to be a pre-order for $48 but a bulk pricing for teams. So she just emails me. We'll get her pricing, which would be pretty significant for bulk orders for up to 10 and then 11 sets and higher. So she just shoots me an email. I think I have her email too. I can send it to her.
Okay.
But anybody that wants to know the team bulk ordering, just shoot me an email, Austin@wassermanstrength.com.
And then Trent asked you, are you doing any one-on-one training online?
So I haven't publicly announced this, but we just launched privately our remote training system, which will be able to do one-on-one, like online programming and video work, and just kind of a place to house all of the athletes' assessments and information. So they can shoot me an email at Austin@wassermanstrength.com, and we can kind of get them set up.
Okay, perfect.
I'll launch it the next 2 weeks for real. So
that's awesome. I think that's all the questions we have right now. I'll let you guys know if anything else comes in, but Austin or Brittany, did you guys have any closing remarks you wanted to add?
I mean, I think this was a phenomenal, group of people talking about something that's really important, and again, sometimes gets forgotten about and neglected. And we want to see all these, really cool videos online. The best athletes, the elite athletes, do the boring stuff a lot, and they do it really well, and they're just consistent with their training. I'm sure you all have success stories with, athletes that have put the time in, from a rehab standpoint, and then from a player standpoint of completely changing, the way that they've developed into the player they are today. So, I think it's awesome to have everybody here pulling for that. So, I appreciate, again, everyone here listening. The PowerPoint, again, sometimes gets a little complex and lots of different movements and verbiage and things like that. But, I'm here to talk, and email me if you have questions. But I thank you guys for coming, and, I'm excited to work with everybody soon.
So Brittany and Austin, we actually had another question come in that I think it's kind of towards both of you guys. So when you're working out, would you treat this time now as off season or in season? I like that question because we were just in the middle of season, right? And it got cut off. So, and we don't know when season's going to start again. How do you suggest kids train?
Well, that's actually a big thing for me when it comes to just looking at strength training, because I'm assuming that's the main goal, is a big thing when it comes to strength training for me is everyone talks about DOMS, the delayed onset muscle soreness. That's actually not a good thing. So a lot of people think, oh, if I'm not sore for the next 2-3 days, I didn't do my job. So either way, you want to make sure that however you're training, try and train more sport specific. So if you're softball, pretty much everything is explosion. Like I talked about earlier, there's not a lot that we do that's, I need to do pure strength. How much can I lift at one time? Yeah, it's great to work on that, but why do we want to do something that's like that versus try and do something that's more sport specific? So if we're trying to work on explosion of the legs, for example, I'll use my pitchers. We need the explosion from the legs. So let's do exercises that would be single movement exploding from the legs, or for my sprinters, my slappers, we need to do something that's explosion, getting out of the box, pushing off the first base to steal second. So going back to the question, I would really say you can kind of treat it as either. I mean, we're supposed to be in season, but we're not. But as long as you are not overdoing it, there's really no way to hurt yourself. I know there's off season and then during season strengthening, but if you're smart about it, you can train as hard as you want, whether you're in season or not. So I say go for it as long as you can do it the right way. And if you're not sure what that is, feel free to ask specific questions for me or Austin if you want to jump in on that too. I'm more than happy to help guide you further.
Yeah, it's kind of it's like a tricky time. We've all trained really hard in the off season and then started to play, and then obviously this happened. So I think we have to treat it as kind of like a blended season. So like kind of like a preseason, I guess, like that your games are coming potentially. But if they don't come, you're still prepared and primed for the next potential training session or your off season. So, you know, I talk to like my high school kids, like if you take the in season off, so let's just say the high school season is 3 months or 4 months. Let's just say it's 4 months. So for some states, for New England, it's probably 3 months because we can't get outside until April. But I think you have to treat it as, if you take those 3 months off every single year for 4 years, you're going to lose an entire year of training. So I don't think you have to necessarily stop your training. I just think you have to just modify and be creative and you know, kind of continue to do what you're doing and tracking your sets and rep schemes. You know, having blended skill sessions with strength sessions just to keep your skills up. Again, we just don't know when we're going to get back to the season. So, you know, if you're trying to do something every day, whether it's lifting Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you're doing a mobility piece, maybe Tuesday, Thursday, and you're blending in, sprinkling in your skill development, your throwing sessions, like that's fine. You don't have to, you know, you don't have to max out. You don't have to necessarily test. I just think you have to stay consistent with your training during this time because, again, and even if the season doesn't happen, you're still going to be prepared for that next off season and you're not going to be left behind. So, you know, all the seasons are now like blending in. Like we don't train for 4 years for a meet, like, or for a match. Like we play every day or 7 times in a weekend. So we have to still, you know, train throughout these times, off season, in season, preseason. It's just being smart with volume, sets, rep schemes, not implementing anything, you know, crazy or new that is going to potentially, you know, create an injury. So you, like your risk versus reward ratio, like, okay, let me do a Bosu ball single leg balance and try and do like a power clean on it. Like really, that's probably not the smartest thing to do. So, you know, let's stay on the ground. Let's learn how to produce force. Let's learn how to produce force rapidly. Let's still sequence the body. Let's take care of our arm. And when, you know, when it's time to start getting out and playing, like we should be prepared for those times.
Awesome.
That's a tricky question though. It's definitely a tricky question for sure.
Brittany, another one for you. How important should soft tissue work be to young athletes to learn and be aware of in this time off when they have the time?
Very important. That is an awesome question. And honestly, soft tissue work is something that should be done at all times. And this is, if kids can do it on their own, awesome. Parents, if you need to help out, help them out a little bit. But it's huge. The research that's behind just 5 minutes of going over your muscle tissue and seeing the improvements just after a couple of sessions of 5 minutes, it's unreal. So if any kind of soft tissue, and that's where I personally, I love deep tissue. That's honestly what I do a lot at my work. But as whether it's soft massage, deep massage, whatever you go to, as long as you're working through the muscle, it is fantastic for your body. There's honestly, when it comes to just a normal massage, you can't overdo it. Deep tissue is something, obviously, you don't want to do multiple sessions in a row on the same spot, because if someone bruises easily or anything like that, you could cause some damage. But just to do a gentle massage, full body daily, I mean, if you can get access to that, go for it.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think soft tissue is critical. You know, whether it's a lacrosse ball or, you know, some variation of a foam roller or, you know, some type of, you know, like the Theragun or Hypervolt or whatever it is. You know, there's some stuff out there that you can utilize to help kind of warm up the tissue and prepare it for, you know, for the day. So, you know, and again, like if a girl is, you know, rolling out their, you know, bicep and they're calling it their tricep, like it's just another way to be aware of the muscles and, you know, what your body, you know, wears, you know, what is where, you know, not your quads, your hamstrings, your quads. So it gives the kids an understanding of, you know, what you're talking about, you know, maybe in a throwing session or hitting session. So I think it's still, you know, pretty important to do some soft tissue work. And if you have access to a therapist for manual, you know, therapy, that's critical. That's huge.
Yep.
Hey, Kate, you want me to take that question by Trent?
Sure. Yeah, we got 2 questions left. These will be the last 2. So go ahead and take that one, JB.
Okay, so Trent asks, where we live, the parks are closed. Is there anything we can do throwing in small areas to build arm strength and correct throwing? So the reason I said I'd answer this is because I was fortunate that my son Jackson worked with Austin a year or so ago. And one of the things that Jackson does, a lot of the kids on his baseball team, he's only 10 years old, but a lot of the kids, they're not, the team's not necessarily doing some of these patterns. So what we do is we have the bow net set up in the backyard. He has his basket of balls, he has his 30 or 40 baseballs, and literally his throwing partner, if I can't help him, is the net. So he'll just get his basket of balls, and he'll go through each one of those, of his progressions that we got straight off of Wasserman's stuff. And he'll do that in the backyard, and it doesn't need a ton of space. You can't do the really long throws, but you can still do all the patterning work and the stuff with the legs and everything. So literally a player can get in the backyard with the same things they use for hitting with their bow net, a basket of balls, and they can go through all of this pattern work and really stay in good arm shape.
I used to just tape up like a sock and like throw it against my bedroom wall, like work on throwing and pitching. And
that's what I did.
It's just, or in the garage throwing against the back of the fireplace, the cement. So, if you want to get creative and train, you're going to find a way for sure. And you're seeing some really cool videos and pictures of people, training and getting creative with their time off.
And what's great too is even if you don't have access to a ball, or even like we talked about, taping up a sock, just doing mirror works, you actually seeing what your body is doing, that's still practice. Your brain is processing what's going on. So whether you do practice in front of a mirror, or you have someone help film you, slow-mo you, and go back and look at it, any kind of visualization training like that is practice. It counts.
Yeah.
All right, we got the last one here. Austin, I think you might want it. How does somebody work on throwing straight?
On throwing straight. So there's a lot of different, target work that you can do. Like if you don't implement any target training into your routine, the kids are just going to kind of throw all over the place. So, utilizing these drills, and it's come up in clinics where, obviously we're trying to get across the foundational movements and the fundamental patterns. But when you're doing double kneeling or pivot throws or, half kneel, turn and throw, all these complex movements, it's really important to set up a target and different targets. So, whether you have like on the net, you can have different, colored bands that are hanging that you can kind of attack and throw at. But when you're doing any of these drills, especially for the younger kids, I think it's important to set up targets and kind of, yell out, what target they're going to throw to, and have them yell it out as well. So then they can kind of get some awareness of where their arm is in space, what they're thinking about. So giving them kind of more of an external cue to throw the ball versus like thinking internally, like, oh, let's think about your mechanics, and your mechanics might be off, but, let's focus on an external object to create that completion of the task. So we'll do target training with all the drills, which really helps with command. And of course, like the lightning balls, the different variations in weight and size of the ball. And we have kids throwing baseballs, softballs, tennis balls, weighted objects, medicine balls. Like there's a whole bunch of things that you can do that help refine the fine motor control and the release point, and how the wrist is moving through. So yeah, I mean, of course, like we want to be as accurate as possible, but if our fundamental and foundational movements aren't right, there's going to be a breakdown somewhere. So we still have to get our foundational patterns efficient before we can start to kind of focus on command and control. And I like the body to just move as fast as possible at a young age, and then start to refine the release point as you progress. So, using targets with all these high level throwing drills, I think are really important.
Awesome.
We got any other closing remarks, guys?
I just want to thank everybody that joined us on Facebook Live. Had a lot of people hung in there and been with us almost 2 hours.
Dang, crushed it. 2 hours.
Yeah, but I think the cool thing is the participant level has stayed steady, and obviously people are enjoying this information. So thank you everybody out there in Facebook, and then to our own Blaze members who are watching. We have all of our remote training going on, and we're talking so much about the shoulder today with Brittany, and she just released some video that I don't know, Kate, if we've sent it out yet or if it's going out soon, in our remote training program, where she does a whole thing on keeping your shoulder strong and stuff like that. So there's lots of information out there to stay in shape.
All right, let's do our last prize giveaway real quick. Okay,
All
so
right.
we've got one more set of Wasserman's lightning balls, so the weighted balls that he's been talking about. Random draw. All right, we've got Reed Sharp. Reed Sharp, you've won a set of Austin's lightning balls. Shoot me an email.
Congrats.
Yeah, shoot me an email, ccain@texasblaze.org, and we will get you set up. Thanks, Reed. Thanks for being here. Austin, Brittany, you guys were awesome. Y'all killed it. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for giving back to the softball community and just letting this information be out there, be freed for everybody. It just makes our sport better, it makes our athletes better, makes our coaches better. We really appreciate everything you guys are doing for the sport. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Means a lot. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Y'all have a great night.
Cool. You too.
You too.
Thanks, guys.